Picture this: November 1932, Western Australia. Three men huddle behind a Lewis machine gun, a weapon that had mowed down thousands in the trenches of the Great War. Their target, not enemy soldiers, not rebels, not even dangerous criminals. Birds, specifically emus. 20,000 of them, marching across farmland like a feathered army, destroying everything in their path. What you're about to hear isn't fiction. It isn't exaggeration. This is the true story of the only war in recorded history where the Australian military deployed machine guns against wildlife and lost. This is the story of the Great Emu War of 1932. But to understand how Australia found itself at war with its own birds, we need to go back. Back to the trenches of France, back to the promises made to soldiers, and back to the unforgiving reality of the Australian outback. 1918. The Great War ends. Australia has lost over 60,000 men, more casualties per capita than almost any other allied nation. These weren't professional soldiers. They were farmhands, shopkeepers, teachers, boys who became men in the mud of France and the cliffs of Gallipoli. The survivors come home to a country that owes them everything. They carry with them not just physical scars, but the psychological weight of what they've witnessed. Shell shock, what we now call PTSD, is rampant but unacknowledged. These men are expected to simply readjust. The Australian government knows it has a debt to pay. Prime Minister Billy Hughes stands before Parliament and makes a solemn promise. To those who have given everything for the empire, we shall give land. We shall give them the opportunity to build new lives, to prosper, to create a future worthy of their sacrifice. They call it the Soldier Settlement Scheme, and on paper, it sounds magnificent. 5,000 acres of land in Western Australia for any returned serviceman willing to work it. The government will help with equipment loans, provide some infrastructure, offer agricultural training. It's sold as a dream, a reward for service, a chance to build something after years of destroying things. Over 5,000 veterans take the deal. They pack up their families, wives they'd married before shipping out, children they barely know, and head to the wheat belt of Western Australia, places with names like Campion, Chandler, Walgoolan, and Wyall Ketchum, towns that exist more on maps than in reality. Wide open country, endless skies, land that stretches to the horizon in every direction. It must have seemed like freedom after the claustrophobic hell of the trenches, but there's something the government brochures don't mention. Something the politicians in Perth and Canberra either don't know or don't care to acknowledge. This land, it's marginal at best. The soil is thin, barely topsoil over hardpan. The rainfall is unreliable, fluctuating wildly from year to year. Temperatures swing from freezing nights to scorching days, and the ecosystem is harsh, unforgiving, and utterly indifferent to human ambition. This isn't the rich farmland of England or the American Midwest. This is the edge of the habitable world. These men who survived Gallipoli, who endured the Somme, who watched friends die in mud and poison gas, now find themselves fighting a different kind of enemy, the land itself. They clear the scrub. Native vegetation that's taken decades to grow is cut down and burned. They pull out stumps by hand, by horse, by sheer bloody-minded determination. Their hands blister, their backs scream, but they persist. They plant wheat, row after row, acre after acre. They work dawn to dusk, learning as they go. Some have farming experience, many don't, but they learn. And for a few years, from about 1923 to 1928, it almost works. The wheat grows, the harvests come in, prices are decent, the loans get paid, families expand, communities form, churches and schools are built, there are dances on Saturday nights, cricket matches on Sunday afternoons. For a brief, shining moment, it seems the government's promise might actually be kept. These farmers start to believe. They invest in better equipment, they expand their acreage, they buy livestock, they plant fruit trees, thinking of the future, of grandchildren who will harvest from orchards they'll never see mature. But the land has other plans. 1929, October 24th. Half a world away, the New York Stock Exchange collapses. Black Thursday, the beginning of the Great Depression. The news takes weeks to fully reach the Western Australian wheat belt. At first, it seems distant. American problems, European problems. Surely Australia, with its vast resources and small population, will weather it. They're wrong. The Great Depression doesn't arrive in Australia with a bang. It seeps in like floodwater through sandbags. Slow, inevitable, devastating. Wheat prices collapse. What was once worth a shilling per bushel now fetches 3 pence, then 2 pence, then less. The global market has no use for Australian grain when there's too much of everything everywhere. These farmers, these veterans, are caught in an impossible trap. They can't afford to harvest their crops because the cost of harvesting exceeds what they'll make selling it. The mathematics are cruel. Spend a pound to harvest wheat worth 10 shillings. But they can't afford not to plant either, because the land payments are still due. They owe money to banks. They owe money to the government for the land, for the equipment, for the loans they took when times were good. They'll owe money to merchants for seed, for fuel, for basic supplies. Families start rationing meals, meat becomes a luxury, then fresh vegetables. Children go to school when there's still a teacher employed with empty lunch pails. Women make clothes from flour sacks. Men repair equipment with wire and prayer, because new parts are unthinkable luxuries. The social fabric begins to tear. Neighbors who once helped each other now view each other as competitors for scarce resources. Community gatherings become rare. There's no money for the church collection plate, no ingredients for the shared meals. Suicide rates spike. The statistics are grim. Between 1929 and 1932, suicide among Western Australian farmers increases by 40%, but those are just the recorded deaths. How many accidents were really men who'd reached the end of their endurance? Families abandon farms in the night, leaving behind everything they couldn't carry. The wheat belt becomes a landscape of broken dreams and empty homesteads, ghost towns in the making. And the veterans, men who'd survived one of history's deadliest wars, break. By 1932, the soldier settlement scheme is effectively dead. Of the 5,000 families who'd taken up land, nearly 2,000 have already left. The rest are hanging on by their fingernails, one bad season away from complete ruin. The government in Perth is bankrupt. The federal government in Canberra is overwhelmed. There's no money for relief, no money for buyouts, no money for assistance of any kind. And then, as if the universe itself has decided these people haven't suffered enough, as if their misery requires one final, absurd insult. The emus arrive. Now, let's talk about emus for a moment, because understanding them is crucial to understanding why this wasn't just a nuisance. It was an ecological catastrophe in the making. The emu, Dromaeus novae hollandiae, is Australia's largest native bird and the second largest bird in the world, by height after the ostrich. They stand up to 6.5 feet tall. They weigh between 60 and 90 pounds of solid muscle and feather. They can run at speeds of 30 miles per hour and sustain that pace for long distances. Their legs are powerfully muscled, capable of killing a dingo with a single kick. Those same legs can leap fences 6 feet high and crash through barbed wire that would stop a cow. They have excellent eyesight and good hearing. They're curious, adaptable, and, contrary to their reputation, quite intelligent within their ecological niche. Emus are nomadic. They don't have fixed territories. They follow the rain. They follow the food. They follow ancient migrations, routes that have been hardwired into their species for millions of years. They travel in mobs that can number in the hundreds or even thousands, and they're nearly fearless. They've evolved in an environment with few natural predators large enough to threaten an adult emu. Before European settlement, the inland areas of Western Australia were semi-arid scrubland and mallee forest. Emus would migrate through these areas seasonally, but they wouldn't linger because there wasn't enough concentrated food. They'd spread out, foraging on native grasses, seeds, and insects. The ecosystem was in balance. The emus existed as a natural part of it. But then humans cleared the land. Humans planted wheat. Thousands upon thousands of acres of wheat all ripening at the same time, creating a food source of unprecedented density and reliability. From an emu's perspective, this is paradise. Imagine evolving for millions of years to scratch out a living from sparse, scattered food sources and suddenly discovering fields of grain planted in neat, accessible rows stretching to the horizon. Every year, as the Western Australian winter approaches, May through July, emus migrate inland from the coastal breeding grounds, seeking food and water. And starting in the late 1920s, they find something new. They find the wheat fields, 1932. As winter begins, the emus come. First in dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. The farmers of Campion watch in disbelief as mob after mob appears on the horizon. 20,000 emus, maybe more. The counts are estimates, but every farmer agrees on one thing. They've never seen anything like it. The birds don't just eat the wheat, though they eat plenty. Each emu can consume up to 1.5 pounds of food per day, but the real damage is in the trampling. An emu weighs as much as a large dog, and they move in groups. When a mob of 300 emus crosses a wheat field, they crush everything in their path. The wheat is flattened into the mud, the stalks break, the grain is driven into the soil, useless for harvest. And then there are the fences. These farmers have spent years, and money they don't have, building fences. Barbed wire stretched between posts, meant to keep livestock in and pests out. Emus can jump these fences, they can crash through them, and when they do, they create gaps that rabbits can slip through. And rabbits bring their own plague. One farmer near Walgulan reports losing his entire harvest in a single night. 40 acres of wheat, months of work, his family's food security, the money to make his loan payment, gone, trampled into worthless mulch. Another describes waking before dawn to the sound of emus feeding. He runs outside with a rifle and manages to shoot 3 before the rest scatter. 3 birds out of hundreds. He finds 50 more have replaced them by noon. The farmers try everything. They shoot at the emus, but rifles and shotguns are ineffective against mobs this large. You might kill a few, but hundreds more remain. They try noisemakers, pots, pans, bells. The emus ignore them or quickly grow accustomed. They try scarecrows. The emus perch on them. These men have survived a world war. They've survived economic collapse. They've survived drought and debt and despair. But this feels biblical, like a plague sent specifically to mock them. One farmer writes to his brother in Melbourne, "We fought the Germans and won. We're fighting nature and losing." October 1932. The farmers of Campion, Walgulan, and surrounding districts have had enough. They form a delegation and travel to Perth, a journey of several days by truck over rough roads. They request a meeting with the Minister for Agriculture. They bring photographs, they bring testimonials, they bring the hard mathematics of their ruin. The minister listens. He's sympathetic, genuinely so. These are returned servicemen after all. The government owes them. The nation owes them. But here's the brutal reality. The Western Australian government is broke. The Great Depression has gutted the budget. There's no money for compensation, no money for new fencing, no money for professional pest control. The meeting seems destined to end like all the others. Expressions of sympathy, promises of consideration, and absolutely no concrete help. But then someone, the historical record doesn't clearly indicate who, has an idea. A terrible, fateful idea. Why not use the military? Think about it. The veterans are already being supported by the federal government through various assistance programs. The Australian military has surplus equipment from the war, including Lewis guns gathering dust in armories. And Sir George Pearce, the Minister for Defense, is under constant pressure to justify military spending during peacetime when every shilling is scrutinized. A training exercise. That's how it's framed. Soldiers will practice mobile warfare tactics, learn to set up and operate machine guns in field conditions, and coordinate movements across difficult terrain. Simultaneously, they'll assist farmers with a pest control problem. It's framed as a win-win. The farmers get help, the military gets practice, it'll all be over in a few days. A week at most. Nobody realizes they're planning one of history's most bizarre military humiliations. November 2nd, 1932. Major GPW Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery arrives in Campion aboard a military truck. He's a decorated officer, a veteran of the Great War, a man who's commanded artillery batteries under fire. With him are Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran. Between them, they bring 2 Lewis guns and 10,000 rounds of 303 ammunition. The Lewis gun is a beautiful piece of engineering in its way. It's an air-cooled, magazine-fed light machine gun developed during the First World War. It can fire 500 rounds per minute. It's reliable, mobile, and devastatingly effective against massed infantry. It had mowed down thousands of men in the trenches of France. Surely it could handle some birds. Meredith takes his assignment seriously. This isn't a joke to him. He's a professional soldier, and he'll approach this with professional competence. He meets with the farmers, he scouts locations, he studies the emus' patterns, where they water, where they feed, how they move. He develops a strategy. The plan is simple, elegant even. Locate the emu mobs, set up the Lewis guns in concealed positions with good fields of fire, wait for the birds to mass within range, and open fire. The emus have no natural fear of humans at distance. They're not particularly fast in short bursts before reaching full sprint. They travel in dense groups. The mathematics seem favorable. 500 rounds per minute. Dense targets, multiple engagements per day. How hard could it be? Meredith gives a statement to the press gathered in Campion. We'll be targeting the birds with military precision. This operation will be swift and effective. The farmers have endured enough. We're here to provide them relief. The journalists eat it up. This is gold. Man bites dog? No. Military fights birds. The newsreels run footage. The papers run headlines. War on emus declared. Military mobilizes against feathered foe. It's quirky. It's amusing. It's very Australian. The confidence is palpable. After all, these men have operated machine guns in actual combat. They faced human enemies with rifles and artillery. They're professionals up against animals with brains the size of walnuts. The emus, meanwhile, are completely unaware that they're about to become military targets. November 2nd, 1932. Late afternoon, the first engagement. Meredith and his men have been tracking a large mob for hours. They finally locate them near a dam. About 50 emus drinking water, milling about, completely relaxed. Perfect. The soldiers set up the Lewis gun on a slight rise, perhaps 100 yards from the birds. They have a clear line of sight. The sun is behind them. Everything is textbook. Meredith checks his sight lines. McMurray feeds the ammunition drum into place. 97 rounds, ready to fire. O'Halloran spots, watching the birds through binoculars. The emus continue drinking, oblivious. Some preen their feathers. Others peck at insects. They're bunched together, an ideal target. Meredith gives the order. Fire. The Lewis gun roars to life. The sound is deafening, a rapid hammering that echoes across the flat landscape, shattering the outback silence. 97 rounds in approximately 12 seconds. And the emus, they scatter. Not all at once, not in blind panic. They split into small groups. 5 here, 10 there, 15 racing in another direction entirely. They zigzag at full speed, hitting 30 miles per hour almost instantly, moving erratically, making themselves nearly impossible to track, let alone hit. Within seconds, they vanish into the scrub. The gun falls silent, smoke drifts from the barrel. Meredith and his men walk down to the waterhole to assess. 12 birds are down, maybe 15. It's hard to count precisely. 12 confirmed kills from 97 rounds. The rest, 35 or more, are gone. Completely gone. Not running away in the distance. Actually disappeared into the landscape. Meredith stands there, looking at the dead birds, then at the empty landscape, then back at his men. This is puzzling, but not concerning. Not yet. This is day one. They'll adapt. They'll refine their tactics. It's just birds after all. November 3rd. Meredith decides to try something different. If the emus scatter when fired upon from a fixed position, perhaps mobility is the answer. Modern warfare is mobile warfare, after all. He's read Little Heart. He understands the principles. They mount one of the Lewis guns on the back of a truck. The plan, pursue the emus across open ground, firing from the moving vehicle. Combine firepower with mobility. Deny them escape. In theory, it's brilliant. In practice, it's a disaster. The roads, if you can call them that, are rough. Barely roads at all, really. More like tire tracks through the scrub. The truck bounces and lurches. The gunner can't maintain a stable platform. Every rock, every bump throws off his aim. The emus, meanwhile, easily outpace the vehicle across open ground. They leap over obstacles the truck has to navigate around. They split up. They regroup. They move with an agility that 4 wheels and an internal combustion engine simply cannot match in this terrain. At one point, hitting a particularly vicious bump, the gun jams. McMurray works frantically to clear it. A process that takes 3 minutes. 3 minutes during which the emus put half a mile between themselves and their pursuers. By the time the gun is operational again, the birds have vanished. That evening, Meredith tallies the results. Hours of operation. Hundreds of rounds expended. Birds killed. 7. Maybe 8. The ammunition to kill ratio is approaching 50 to 1. That night, Meredith sits in his tent by lantern light reviewing his notes. The numbers don't lie. At this rate, they'll expend all 10,000 rounds and kill perhaps 200 birds. Out of 20,000. A 1% reduction in the emu population. And that's assuming the emus don't adapt further, which, ominously, they seem to be doing. The next day brings an even more disturbing development. November 4th, Meredith tries ambush tactics. He studied the emus' patterns. They cross a particular fence line every morning to access a wheat field. He'll set up before dawn, concealed, and wait. The emus arrive. About 30 of them. They approach the fence line cautiously. More cautiously than they had just 2 days ago. They pause. They scan the area. One bird, Meredith will later describe it as a scout, advances alone, checking the route while the others wait. It's not intelligence in the human sense. It's not reasoning or planning, but it's adaptation. It's instinct responding to threat. Emus have survived in Australia for millions of years by being cautious, by learning what's dangerous, by evolving rapid threat assessment, and in just 2 days they've learned that loud noises from certain positions mean death. Meredith waits until the group is within optimal range. He opens fire. The scout goes down, maybe 3 others. The rest scatter instantly, displaying what military tacticians would call fire discipline, not bunching up, not presenting mass targets. Over the next week, the pattern repeats and intensifies. The emus change their behavior. They approach water sources at night when visibility is poor. They send small groups ahead while the main mob waits. When they hear gunfire, they scatter in predetermined directions. Not random panic, but coordinated dispersal. It's not conscious strategy, but the result is the same. They're employing what military analysts would later call guerrilla tactics. Small units, dispersal, refusing to mass, avoiding predictability. Ornithologist Dominic Cerventi arrives to observe the operation. He's fascinated. He writes in his notes, "The emus have proven that they're highly mobile, extremely wary, and intelligent enough to adapt to threats within their environmental understanding. In many functional ways, they're employing the same defensive strategies that insurgent forces use against conventional military: dispersal, terrain advantage, and refusal to engage on the enemy's terms." Back in Perth, when the press quotes this observation, the headlines practically write themselves. Emus employ guerrilla tactics against Australian military. The humiliation is becoming national. By mid-November, what had started as an amusing curiosity has become a national embarrassment. The Sydney Morning Herald runs a piece titled "Emus Win Battle Against Soldiers." The Melbourne Age publishes a satirical cartoon showing an emu wearing a military helmet, standing on a pile of ammunition casings, saluting. The Melbourne Argus goes further. The Emu Command has evidently ordered guerrilla tactics, and the emus have been seen moving in groups with scouts ahead. If we could organize a military assault on the emu problem, they certainly seem to have outwitted the soldiers. Radio comedians have a field day. Music hall performers work it into their acts. It's everywhere, and it stings because it's true. Meredith is a professional soldier. He's a decorated officer who served with distinction in the Great War. He commanded artillery batteries that broke German positions. He's seen real combat, real war. And now he's being told by journalists, by comedians, by the public, that he's being outmaneuvered by birds. The psychological toll is significant. This isn't just professional failure, it's public humiliation on a national stage. But Meredith persists. He requests additional time, he refines his tactics, he tries dawn raids, dusk ambushes, coordinated multiple gun operations. Nothing works. The fundamental problem remains. The emus are perfectly adapted to this environment, and the Lewis gun, magnificent weapon that it is, was designed for a different kind of war. December 10th, 1932. After 6 weeks of operations, with a brief pause in the middle, the military finally withdraws. Let's talk about the numbers, the hard, incontrovertible numbers. Ammunition expended, approximately 10,000 rounds. That's documented. That's not in dispute. Confirmed kills, somewhere between 50 and 500 birds, depending on who's reporting and how they're counting. Even if we're generous, absurdly generous, and say 1,000 birds were killed, though no credible source claims this, the efficiency is damning. 10 rounds per bird, against targets with no weapons, no armor, no defensive capabilities beyond running. The emu population? Still estimated at 20,000. The operation has reduced their numbers by perhaps 5%. And that's the optimistic calculation. The farmers are right back where they started. The emus are still there. The crops are still being destroyed. And now there's not even the pretense of government assistance. One farmer tells a reporter from the West Australian, "They sent the army. They brought machine guns. They fired 10,000 bullets, and the emus are still here, eating my wheat. Now what? Now, what are we supposed to do?" It's a good question. A haunting question. The answer, when it comes, won't involve the military. But before we get to that, we need to understand what happened in Parliament, because the political fallout from the Great Emu War is almost as fascinating as the war itself. When Parliament reconvenes in early 1933, the opposition is ready. Labour Senator James Dunn stands and delivers a speech dripping with sarcasm. The only thing that the campaign has succeeded in proving is the incompetence of the military when dealing with matters they're not trained for. I move that we consider awarding medals to the Emus for their tactical superiority and steadfast resistance against overwhelming firepower. The chamber erupts in laughter. Another senator suggests granting the Emus the status of conscientious objectors since they clearly won't submit to military authority. Sir George Pierce, the Minister for Defense who approved the operation, faces withering questions. The Hansard records show he's defensive, evasive, and clearly embarrassed. He insists the operation had training value, that the soldiers gained experience in mobile operations, that the difficulties encountered were instructive. But nobody's buying it. The government eventually admits what everyone already knows. The military deployment was a failure, an expensive, public, humiliating failure. They quietly shelve any plans for future military involvement in pest control. So, what actually worked? The government, desperate to save face and actually help the farmers, pivots to a different strategy: bounties. They offer farmers a small payment, 6 pence per bird, for every emu they kill and can prove with feet or beaks. It's not glamorous. There are no newsreels, no political grandstanding, but it works. Over the next 6 months, farmers managed to kill nearly 60,000 emus. 60,000, far more than the military ever could have achieved. How? By using the tactics that make sense for the environment. Patient hunting with rifles, setting up near water sources, coordinating with neighbors, working dawn and dusk when emus are most active and visible. No machine guns, no grand strategy, just practical, persistent effort by people who know the land. And yet, and this is crucial, it doesn't solve the problem permanently. The emus keep coming. Every year, like clockwork, they migrate through. The bounty system becomes permanent. A tacit admission that the emu problem isn't solvable. It's manageable at best. The soldier settlement scheme quietly winds down. Many farms are abandoned. Some are consolidated. The dream of turning the Western Australian wheat belt into a farming paradise dies. Not with a bang, but with the slow accumulation of failed harvests and unpaid debts. And the emus? They're still there. Still migrating. Still thriving. Still winning in their way, simply by continuing to exist in the land that's been theirs for millions of years longer than it's been ours. This has been The War Humans Lost, the Great Emu Conflict of 1932.